when you said you felt your heart on fire, that's one of the most powerful things I've ever felt in my own life when I've had that happen. And when it happened, because I look at that as sort of the ignition of the divine spark, the flame, that's what we had. And that's the flame that seeks to express through all aspects of us. And it's a blessed place to be. And when I first had that happen to me, I was in my late 20s, I think, maybe late 20s, and it changed everything.
So we were just discussing Alchemy, the latest book that I have. I know you're working on another one, but this has been transformational with me in my development spiritually. After you dictated it and it got to paper, or I guess paperback or whatever you call that, did you read it like right after, or did you kind of know what was going on when you were channeling?
Well, this was the hardest book that I've ever brought through, and that's because of what I was going through personally as the book was being dictated. And I don't think that was necessarily an accident. I was in the midst of an enormous purge as this was happening. The very first day, I don't know when the books are going to start. I know that I had a workshop, and I was hoping they would start the book soon. I was at Esalen. And I'd begun the workshop there. They didn't do anything on a book. And then I woke up the next morning and I got news of a friend's suicide, a friend of mine from my academic life. And then I walked into the classroom reeling, and the guy sat down and began the book. And that's how I was basically in a place of feeling completely sort of displaced and a bit out of control through the entire process of it because of things that kept emerging. So when I was dictating this, or when the guides were speaking through me, because the books are all spoken and then they're transcribed, and they would say, this is in the text, this is in the text, I just kept saying, okay. I didn't care, to be honest with you. I just wanted to complete showing up for this process. And when it was done, I didn't read it. I mean, I read it enough to proof it, because I had to do that once it was typeset and copy edited. I had to go back. The first time I really experienced the book was here on Hawaii. I'm in Hawaii now, on Maui, when I had to do the audiobook. And it was supposed to be dictated in New York, but the studios were all closed, and they found a place for me to do it here. And I was here. And that's when I sat down and read from start to finish and had an experience of the book. And I was actually amazed at how coherent it was, and really how beautiful it was, because as it was coming, I kept feeling that the channel was sort of in a place of triage, and I was just trying to get through the dictations. Never had anything like that happen before. And, when the book was completed, I thought, my God, I wonder if this book needs to be, come with a warning label, because, like your crap's going to come up to the surface with this, because mine did. And I'm grateful that it did in retrospect. I'm grateful for everything I went through during that period. It's changed me in real ways. But that was my experience. I know I'm giving you more of an answer than you were probably expecting, but it's a hard process to talk about, because in some ways it's been somewhat different than the others. They're all the same, and that I show up again and again. I close my eyes, I hear one phrase repeated incessantly, then I speak that phrase, and the rest of the lecture just pours out on top of it, and that's what gets transcribed. That's been the case from the very beginning. But I feel that their fluency through me continues to improve. Their ability to work through me, I suspect, continues to get better as I keep throwing up my hands and saying, just do what you're going to do, because it's not mine to control. It's not mine to edit. But this process was remarkable. I've dictated another book since then. They finished that about a month and a half ago here on Maui, which was a very different process. That was a very peaceful process. So anyway.
Are you following along with that dictation, or are you going to wait till the end?
That's very different. That book I haven't read any of. I
Mhm.
actually turned it into the editor. I think I've read 2 pages of it.
Really?
Yeah, I just couldn't read it. And it's not that I was resistant to it, it's that I was so overloaded with channeled material. I had just finished doing the audiobook of Alchemy. And then suddenly I was in, a workshop, and they started to, it was all the workshops are online now. And they started delivering the new book.
Mhm.
And I really, for whatever reasons, and I'm not sure why I said I don't want to look at this now, but I really didn't. And I guess it's an act of great faith at this point that I could deliver a book to my publisher that I haven't read. But that's what I did this time, because the rule is I don't get to go back and change it anyway. So the book was carefully proofread.
Yeah.
The woman
Yeah.
who, we have a transcriptionist that, that does all of the recordings to paper. And then it goes to somebody who knows the work very well, who proofs it very carefully against the original recording. And so everything's very, very clean in terms of the process of keeping the integrity of the guide's teachings. So I would only review things where there were questions about the transcript. Did you say belief or believe? It's usually a vocal thing,
Sure.
or softening a consonant, or whispering, and it's just sometimes the dictation comes so fast that there's almost no way. I'm amazed that people keep up as well as they do. So no, I haven't read the new book. They're continuing to teach, though, the principles of the new work in their recent workshops, and they're moving into new stuff. They're teaching manifestation now in a very different way than I'm used to hearing about it. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, the like you said, this book is very clean. Like I feel like with the series, it's like the more that I evolve, the more that I expand in my spiritual growth, the more I understand these books. This one really kind of like the aha moment for me was more so being in the moment and learning how to be in the moment. And then what really knocked it out of the park for me was like page 94, where you talk about, or where you channel the part about the second coming of Jesus isn't going to be in physical form. It's going to be in I guess in man, right? Like it's going to be that rolling back of the rock, of the cave, which is our heart. So the heart is the tomb, and the rolling away of that rock and Jesus coming through our heart is the second coming of Christ. And that basically translated to me in that we need to love others, love others as Jesus loved us. And that, I've never heard that phrase, or I've never even thought about that until this book. And it really opened up my eyes. I don't know if that did that for you, but man, it was like a spiritual knockout for me.
Mm-hmm. They don't talk about Jesus much. They reference it in the teachings, and they reference him with great honor. But their teachings, their definition of Christ has always been the aspect of the creator that can be realized in material form as who and what we are. It's the divine spark, or they call it the monad sometimes, that seeks its expression through us at the cost of all other things, which is the claim they've been teaching. Behold, I make all things new, which is the divine as redeemer, as the one who reconciles the disparate pieces of ourselves with the whole, with the source of all things. And when they do teach about him, and this is one of the books where they got sort of direct, because I remember that passage about the rock being rolled back, or the boulder being rolled back, and being surprised by that as an explanation for what I thought was a metaphor, which is, we have to release what's blocking our heart for this light to shine through us, with that which conceals the light. I was surprised when they reference him, because, people get either turned off by that or they get excited by it, but it's not a religious teaching. These books aren't a religious teaching. It's actually, they say that they're reclaiming some things that were very true that perhaps have been misinterpreted over time. But what you're speaking about, loving everybody, is absolutely their teaching. They're not, and they're getting more and more and more direct about it. They're teaching us about moving beyond this idea of separation, or tribalism that we've moved into as a world, because that's not how they say we're going to evolve or survive.
Yeah. And then they also talk about, you do not, because I underline this because I kind of wanted to ask your take on it. You do not become the Christ becomes you. Now, can you explain that a little bit for me?
As best I can. I
Sure.
mean, places where since then they've sort of talked about an integration of self with that vibration in terms of identity. But that's something that they've taught. The line that you spoke is something that I've heard for a very long time from them. This isn't a teaching about the deification of the personality self. So you hear people running around saying, well, I'm God and so are you, and I'm God and I say it's this way or that, That's the personality structure seeking its rule through us. And the guides say that, you don't become this, which means the personality structure isn't suddenly becoming Jesus, but that the Christ or that level of consciousness aligns you, becomes you. And in that, there's humility. In that, there is surrender. In that, there is allowance and then alignment, as best I understand it.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the first time they said that was in a workshop many years ago, one of the first that I ever did in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And somebody said, well, I'm the Christ. And the guides lovingly redirected him to the understanding of what he was saying, which is this is not about your. You see, I think personally that the personality self or the egoic structure likes specialness. We want to be special. We want to be the only one or the one who got there first. And I don't get that with them. They don't teach me that way. And they tend to teach, I hear plurality, that we're all of the same source, singular expressions perhaps of the one source, but that we are all finally one. And the divine self, which they call the monad or the Christ itself or the true self, that aspect of itself knows who it is, which is of the whole. It's the personality self that does. And so, again, a long answer. I don't know if I made any sense.
No, Paul, I love it. Everything. I mean, you're perfect, buddy. You're like you're batting 1,000 right now. So do not worry, please. More is better because then not least less I got to talk. But I mean, every chapter is just like a grabber, number 2, the resurrected self. Why do you ask yourselves what will happen to me when the action of the moment is to be in the moment you sit in? Like that has been the toughest thing for me because all the spiritual texts that I read is like the moment is where the gift is. The moment is where eternity is. It's like the ego steals that from us because it always wants to say, all right, what are you doing next? Where are you going next? You're not good enough to do this. You need to think about the past because you messed up here. Fear, takes us over. And it's like, you have that choice of how are you going to present yourself in the moment? Like, are you going to present yourself as happy, joyous? Are you going to be positive? Like each moment is a gift. Like you can be any of those things in the moment. And if you're not, you have that next moment that's coming that you can choose to be joyous.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just that simple. I mean, this teaching has really opened me up because that's where I got the idea of the moment. And like, this is where I had the aha, where the moment is the gift. That is the gift. I was giving my daughter a bath and I was like, holy shit. Like right after reading the book, I was like, this here right now, like, this is why I incarnate, is because I need to realize these moments. Like, this is why I come back to express my feelings in this moment.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's another part. Sorry. I just have a lot of shit underlined and I just want to go through it a little bit because I love it. But we talk a lot about vibration, right? And going to the upper room. Is that how we get there? Is the vibration inside of us?
How do we get to the upper room? I mean, it's the teaching of the book. Let me see if I can do this coherently today. I may have to go to them and let them do it, which is, I'm actually really not up for this today. I'm dealing with real estate stuff all
I know you've been busy.
Oh, it's been crazy. Let me see. So the upper room, the guides say this. I'm going to explain the upper room first. The guides say that we live in an octave, a shared octave of high and low notes in vibration. Everything is in vibration. We're living in this shared octave of what we call reality. And they say every song can be played or sung in the octave above it and above it and above it into eternity. Even if the ears can't hear it, that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. So the upper room, I understand, is the octave above the one that we're used to. And they talk about transposition or transposing the self that we are to operate at that level. And it's done through a series of vibrational attunements. And the attunements, they say, they talk about vibrational accord. ACCORD or ACHORD is on a piano. And they say we are in vibrational accord to everything we can experience, individually and collectively. And so what they're doing with us is supporting our alignment through integration at varying levels to a higher level of tonality, where what you call to you must be in co-resonance to what exists at that level. So it's very, very simple. The claim is I am in the upper room, and the claim is made by the divine self, the aspect of the self that already exists there. So the true self operates in what you want to call the upper room or the higher level of vibration. It does not operate in fear. They say the true self knows who it is, what it is, knows how it serves. It's not questioning everything. It already knows. So you're aligning to that aspect of self that exists there, and you're allowing it to support you to that level of resonance. And it's done through attunement and claim, the simplest one being, I am in the upper room. That is followed by a series of attunements that support one in holding that level of vibration, if I'm understanding it correctly. So the guides say, we're all radios. We're always in vibration. We're always playing a broadcast. Our broadcast is our consciousness. What they're doing through the attunements is tuning the radios that we are to operate at a higher level of tone or frequency. They call the upper room Christ mind or Christ consciousness. It's a level of vibration. And they say from that place of operation, you're actually able to lift to you what you encounter through co-resonance. The being that you are is operating at such a pitch that it lifts what it encounters through entrainment. It's about being at that level. It's not about fixing things. It's about operating at that level. They actually say you become the doorway to the upper room for others, or portal to the upper room through your level of embodiment there. That's the understanding I have.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. Yeah, I feel like just reading your books, I get that level of attunement. Like when we were in person, when you came to Baltimore and we had that nice get together through Joe, my brother-in-law, shout out to Joe. My vibration was going through the roof. We were sitting there at the table with my wife and we were doing an exercise and I could literally feel her energy. The energy in the room, it was just a beautiful moment. I remember looking to my wife, I was like, man, my heart is on fire. And I told you that. Mm-hmm. I was like, I just never experienced that before. That's really when I started understanding what true vibration was, like how to raise my vibration. I never knew what it was. And I've used that in my life recently to like really point me in the direction that I need to go. Like, I'm allowing it and I'm following it. Whenever I feel that vibration, I know that it's pointing me in the right direction. Do you find that true for yourself? Like you're in Maui right now. We were just talking about this. You lived in New York for a long time. Like you've rented your entire life. Is that how you like to make that decision to live in Maui, right? To stay in Maui? Do you feel, obviously you had the guides, but do you feel that vibration that is true? Like follow that feeling and like it will lead you.
Well, it's funny. In my case, I was sort of saying I would like to get out of New York for a number of years anyway. And the guides in broadcast started saying that there's this very large thing that's going to come and that New York was going to be affected. And I said, well, just please get me out of New York when it happens, and please let it be someplace beautiful. That's all I said, me and my assistant out so that we can be okay. And sure enough, we were in Costa Rica working when that happened. And everything I have to say that has happened since then has felt enormously directed And everything has been about my letting go of my own expectations. Right before I got on that plane to Costa Rica, I had rented what I thought was my dream apartment in Manhattan. I was so excited. It was the neighborhood I wanted. It was the space I wanted. I've never spent a night there. I've been paying rent on this place all year long. I was like, I never got there. And here I'm living right now in this very humble little cottage in Maui near friends, you know, and I'm having again and again my mind blown by this experience of what happens when I let go of what I think things are supposed to be. So this is where I'm at now. And yeah, I'm looking at maybe getting my first real home here after a life of having rented things. And perhaps that will happen, perhaps it won't. But I do, and the guides talked about this in a live stream just the other day. They said, you know, Paul, when you think you're not progressing, look at what's happened in the last 8 months, you know, in terms of how you're experiencing yourself and your life and your world. I'm much less afraid than I used to be.
Sure.
Since that book, I have to say, since Alchemy, I mean, it really, I'm not saying I'm free of fear by a long shot, but it really is as if somebody flushed a toilet that was way, way, way backed up for years. And I had no idea how much shit I was holding on to until that happened. So the process for me of the attunements and the guides' work, and the guides say this, you know, finally, it's about how we are. It's about how we be. The books themselves are energetic attunements. People don't need me to channel to them anymore. Thank God. They can just, you know, and have their own thing. But as you said, when you said you felt your heart on fire, that's one of the most powerful things I've ever felt in my own life when I've had that happen. And when it happened, because I look at that as sort of the ignition of the divine spark, the flame, you know, that's what we had. And that's the flame that seeks to express through all aspects of us. And it's a blessed place to be. And when I first had that happen to me, I was in my late 20s, I think, maybe late 20s. And it changed everything, you know. And I wish that flame was always burning and going in a way that I could feel, because it's such comfort. You know, I don't remember his name. There's some mystic, French mystic from, I think, the early 1900s or something. Desjardins, I think is his name. You might want to read him, who spoke about the flame, you know, and the spark, the divine spark. And I've not read about it, but I thought, you know, this is something that exists in esoteric study. If you look at all those pictures of the saints and, you know, the Christ's, you know, depictions of the flaming heart, that's, I think, what's being seen. So anyway, I digress back to your question.
No, I think that's good stuff, because like, I want people to know that I felt that divine spark with Paul Selig, man. Like, that's how legit this stuff is. Like, I mean, your event, like you just being there in that presence of that room of sharing that space with people that I care about, and you facilitating that through the guides, like that was very powerful. And like, even my wife, who is, you know, cradle Catholic, you know, she kind of questions some of this stuff sometimes, because she's growing, she's, you know, she's starting her journey, but she felt something, and she couldn't, I mean, I've never felt that in anything else outside of where we were at. Like, I mean, it's just crazy. And I just hope that people can pick these books up, you know, like Alchemy and a lot of the other works, and, you know, go back to episode 80 previous, when you came on, and listen to that, and start following you, and do some of these live streams, and feel that flame, because that's what you're doing, Paul. I mean, you're helping people get rid of that shit. You know what I mean? Like, Alchemy was a huge, I mean, it was a huge fucking plumber, or, you know, a guy coming in and just plunging the shit out of that toilet. I mean, it really opened up a whole nother world for me.
I'm glad. I am, you know, I'm not the teacher. You know, I always have to say this. I'm not a spiritual teacher. I'm not a guru. I'm this guy that shows up again and again and again, often when I don't want to, and takes this dictation from these guides, you know, and they've been bringing through a teaching that has been coming through in installments since they delivered their first book, which was dictated now in 2009. And so the 9th book is coming out next August 221, and the guides just announced that there are 3 more that they intend to dictate. So, you know, I'm just like, oh, here we are. I'm along for the ride.
Sure.
I'm not necessarily the expert in this stuff, but I've developed as a psychic through doing this work. And I've developed as a good clairsentient, which means I can feel the energy in the room and other people and myself. And what I like about what you experienced and your wife experienced was the energy, because the energy is in some ways what I suspect differentiates this work from some other stuff that may be channeled, in that you get to have your own experience of the vibration. And if you have your own experience of this, it's yours. Then you don't need somebody to tell you anything, it's about your own level of knowing.
Mm-hmm.
True knowing is what they call claircognizance, innate divine knowing. And that's, I think, a very high gift when people are able to receive it.
Yeah, no, because people come in and like, she's read a couple of things and she's like, they don't understand. Like, I mean, people feel guilty, or not feel guilty, but they feel weird when you call it the Christ, right? The Christ mind, the Christ, you are the Christ. People don't know how to take that because they feel like, who am I? I was raised in a religion that said that I should never compare myself to Christ. Who am I? So when they hear the Christ mind or you are the Christ, they don't want to accept that, or they don't want to view themselves as that.
Well, I mean, I was raised sort of an atheist. My first introduction to anything, moderately mystical, was when I landed in a 12-step program out of sheer necessity when I was 25, and some stuff that I read early on got me more comfortable with some of the language the guides use. But it's language, and it's language to depict something. And the guides don't use the word Christ often anymore. They speak of the monad, which is, I think, an esoteric term, but I think it's also a scientific term. It's the part which is of the whole, the singular which is of the entirety. And again, the idea of the Christ, I understand, and I'm not a scholar, as a mystical expression of the divine, that was embodied and realized by Jesus and by others, I've been told, is not a new teaching. But I understand the resistance to it. And I understand how people use language to create division. I hope that the guides that I know what they're doing with this, and I suspect they do at this point, and that they choose their words with caution or with care. Care is a better word. Because I suspect in some ways they're trying to reclaim things that have been misunderstood and misused. They say that the truth of all religions finally is the same things. But over time, it's become somewhat distorted by the institutions of religion, which have economic needs and, desires to control. But at the basis, truth is truth is truth in whatever form it comes in. So people are welcome to substitute the language if they don't like it. The challenge for me, is that the books are unedited. I don't get to go back and fix them. When I was first starting this and the first book or two came out, somebody found my email and wrote me and said, you need to tell your guides to stop using the word Christ because it's upsetting to many people. And you need to tell them that you have to stop whispering and repeating because it's just too distracting. And I thought, if I had a say in this, I probably would have done it already. But my job is to take dictation. Yeah. It's not to tell the guides. I can question the guides and they answer, but it's not to give them their content. That's not my job.
Sure. No, it is what it is. Me personally, I think it's a beautiful process, in my opinion. I think it is something that is very powerful, and it's something that if you haven't experienced, I would suggest to go look at it and get on YouTube. And it's just a part of the experience. It's just kind of like it's just that powerful to me. And I don't know. I just think people are just going to be, the program, right? They're just the programming that they've had their entire lives, and you got to just shake that. You got to do something powerful, and this is this is the book that's going to do it. Is Alchemy. It's going to shake them right out of their childhood programming. But channeling, right? So I've been reading a little bit. Do you ever compare notes at all, as a channeler? Do you ever look at other channelers and kind of look at their? No,
I really don't, and I make it a point not to. I've read about half of a Seth book, and that was when I was probably younger than you. which I thought was amazing and fascinating, but I didn't finish it. But I've seen some video of Jane Roberts, who was the channel for Seth, and she was a channel that was working in the 70s. And I think it's extraordinarily authentic. I completely get it. I see how she's working. It's really high teaching. And Edgar Casey, who was a trance channel, I know his work. The contemporary people I don't follow. And I don't follow because I don't want to compare myself. Occasionally, I'll hear, oh, so-and-so says this too. And I go, oh, that's good to hear. It's sort of affirming and nice, but I'm not seeking it out. I've developed as a channel without real instruction. I do it in a way that's unique to me, which is not nearly as graceful as some people seem to be when they do this work. But I see that and I don't always trust it entirely. For me, it's a herky-jerky physical process. I'm told my eyes turn bright blue often when I'm channeling, which, I have hazel eyes when they do this thing, when they stand in front of people. My arms, my body is used. And I'm along for this, and it's a fascinating experience, but it's not, oh, it's lovely today, and oh, everybody's here, and oh, it's not a walk in the park. Maybe that's just because I physically haven't acclimated to the level of vibration which would smooth it out. And that's possible. It's a lot smoother than it was. If you see video of me from, say, 10 years ago channeling, there's not a lot of it. It's when I was just starting to tape a group that met in my apartment. I wasn't doing public events. You'd see me rocking like I was at the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem, rocking. And there was a crazy period when I was channeling on my feet, but I work with my eyes closed. So we put a big circle of chairs, and the guides would come in, and bang, I was out of the seat and waving my arms and hoping I didn't fall over the people, sitting in the first row, and that thankfully stopped, but these have all been stages, and there was just so much energy moving through that I had to be with it at that level. Now it's calmed down. So I occasionally somebody will show up on my social media feed channel, and I go, well, that's really interesting, but it's not what I know. It's not how I work. And I tend to be a little suspicious of channels that are bringing through, current events and political opinions and stuff like that, because that feels to me at times a little bit more low level. My guys are teachers. I don't think they care how people vote. They don't care who killed Princess Di if that's what happened. That's not their job. Their job is to teach. And so people are pulling in information from different levels. Sure. I mean, there's lots of radio stations to play. So I just know the one that I play, and I honor everybody else's right to do what they do.
Yeah. Well, no, you talked about the Seth book. I read that and I liked it a lot. I'm reading Ramtha right now, just out of curiosity. And I think I watched some Esther Hicks as well, but it seems like I don't know, Abraham Hicks, maybe not so much. Maybe she's not there in the body. I don't know if she's vibrating, feeling the vibrations and speaking that through, but like Ramtha, it seemed like she left her body when she was channeling. Now you don't do that. You just hear the vibration or feel the vibration and speak through that, right?
No, I'm a conscious channel, but what I do is I step back. So if you can imagine, what I'm doing is climbing into the back seat of the car and letting the guides drive, but I'm still in the back seat of the car. So I can come to the forefront and say, hey, what did you just say? Hey, what does that mean? And they'll say, Paul is interrupting. That's what that means. But I'm present for it. But I'm slightly removed. When I channel, it's not like I'm hearing a voice in the room. And there is a level of embodiment that does happen, which is why, when the energy is really high, my body's used in a different way. I don't talk like I talk. But it's as if you can imagine you're thinking about what's for dinner, and going to the grocery store and trying to remember what the list is that your wife wants you to pick up, from the store. And you're doing your thing, and all of a sudden a thought comes through that interrupts your stream of thought in a very pronounced way. And the thought is other. So if I'm doing that and all of a sudden I out of the blue, I hear Bruce is in the hospital, I'm like, what? I'm not thinking about Bruce. I'm not thinking about anything. You see, that would be the equivalent of the thought that comes with the channeling. And if I follow that first thought, I allow that to take precedence, and I allow all of my own thoughts to go to the back seat. And I let them continue to roll this thing out, usually phrase after phrase after phrase, until it's completed. And then they'll say, stop now, please. And stop now, please is for me, and it means, Paul, we're done for now. And that's it. And then I'm present. When I read for people, which is a bit more psychic, although the guides are there, it's as if I'm sharing the front seat of the car with the guides. So if you say, wow, I'm really worried about my wife, and I tune into your wife, I might start to resemble your wife when I do that. I can hear her. As long as they're still alive, I can usually hear them. I can hear you at a higher level. It's like you become the radio station that I plug into. This is clairaudience, is what it's called. And then occasionally the guys will pipe it and say, well, this is what they're feeling, but this is what's really happening. And we'll get commentary from a much higher level. And there, I'm not as removed because I'm stepping into so many people. When I work psychically, I have to interpret information as well, which is very different than when I'm channeling. There's no interpretation in channeling, straight out dictation. That's it.
Awesome. I've always wondered, like, all right, so a guy with your gifts, right? Like you do a lot, like, for others. Like, I mean, you put in the hours. Like, I mean, you came to Baltimore and then you went to Alexandria right after. I mean, you hustled a lot pre-COVID. Now it's just mostly live streams, right? And interviews like this. Like, I guess you can't really do too many. I mean, I guess webinars or Zoom conferences and stuff like that, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But the difference is, we might have had 70 people in a workshop for a weekend, and we'll have 700 in a live stream situation.
That's awesome. 700. Yeah. That's incredible.
Yes. Well, we've had a few thousand at times, when we've done things that were for free or pay as you go. Mm-hmm. But every month we've been doing a 5-day intensive, and we try to keep it very reasonable so people can attend.
Sure.
And, the guides are teaching up a storm. So the work actually has grown during COVID in terms of the people receiving the work or seeking out the work. I'm grateful for that people are finding help from this in these times. I don't know what happens when I go back to travel. Right now, it's working quite well. The classroom has grown enormously.
Do you want to travel though? I feel like this is like perfect.
I was a classroom teacher for 25 years at NYU. I liked the classroom. I loved the kids. I taught college, freshmen, sophomores, juniors. They were great. And I miss some of that, and I like that the work has been discovered by a much younger audience in the last couple of years, which is also exciting. So it was nice for me when I was doing these workshops, when these kids would walk in, these guys and their girlfriends and their yoga mats and a pat on the back, and like they're all ready for the guides. I got such a kick out of it. I loved it. But they can come online, and we can meet online. And when it's possible for me to do live events, I would do them. I don't know that I would go back to the intensity that I was doing things before. I was on the road 3 times a month, usually 3 weekends a month, or sometimes 3 weeks at a time. But I enjoyed that. But what it showed me finally, because I began doing that when I left my academic life. And my academic life provided me community and friendships and a regular schedule. And when I decided to let go of that, suddenly I didn't have any of it. And I think I was receiving that through the live events in a way. But it was also allowing me to avoid getting a personal life, and now I'm kind of saying, I'm ready for that. I'm ready for community and a partner and a home. And when it's time, I'm happy to be on the road again, but perhaps with a little bit more irregularity than I was doing it before, because the online stuff is helping people and it's available.
Yeah, no, it's a great way to, like you said, your market's changing a little bit. I mean, you're getting a lot new. I mean, I think me for real, like I'm a big fan, and I think that this content needs to get out there. And I think The online method is very efficient because you can share it on Facebook and Instagram and all these social media outlets and get it to the masses. And I think a lot of people, especially now in COVID, we definitely need this type of material, and to understand, there isn't, I don't know, like the conditioning that we've grown up in. I think it's great to have another viewpoint and an idea, and to go off your feeling, that vibration that you get from these books.
My MO with this has always been to let people come to the work. We'll advertise enough to let people know that it's happening. I have a webpage, we have a newsletter. We'll advertise events on Facebook just to let people know that they're there. But I've never tried or wanted to sell people on this stuff. I don't think that that's how it works. And I do feel that the right people find the work, and other people tell them about the work. When I used to do the live events, I would go around in the beginning and ask everybody how they found the work of the guides. And I can't tell you how many times somebody would say, I walked into a bookstore and it fell off the shelf in front of me. The friend that brought me to Maui had that experience. I had never known him, but he was in Asheville. I think the book fell off the shelf. I think that's what he told me. And he's one of my dearest friends now. So I think people get called to this when it's appropriate or ready, and it's not the only teaching. I would never say that this is the only way to a spiritual awareness. I think that there are different paths, and people are called to different of them at different times in their lives. So I'm okay. If somebody wants to talk about the books, I'm happy. I'll show up for these interviews because I actually enjoy them. But, I don't care on a personal level if somebody doesn't like the books. I don't care. I didn't write them. My name's on the cover. I didn't write them. You're not going to harm my ego by saying your books just suck. No, it's like, okay, I'm sorry you feel that way, but I didn't write it. And I'm used to that now, that funny division. I feel accountable to the work and responsible to my part in showing up in my integrity as best I can for this process. But, it's not about making people happy. If I wanted to make people happy, I would tell them how to get their dream job and, the man or the woman of their dreams,
Sure, yeah.
And this on cruise ships. Yeah. It's not happened for me that way. I did this work in my apartment for about 18 years. Sometimes 3 people would show up, sometimes 20. And people would put $10 in a basket. And that's where I developed, and that's where I learned. And I've often said, if everybody stopped showing up tomorrow, and I hope they don't, I would go back to doing 3 people, 20 people, whoever wants to come, because I doubt I would stop the dictation.
Oh, when you left the academic world, obviously there was some fear there, right? Like, you're going from this salary, I'm assuming, and then you're going to go into this world where it's undetermined what's going to happen. Like, how did you get over that?
I just did it finally. I was terrified, truthfully. I had been hearing from the guides for about a year or 2 before there was time to move forward, and I didn't want to do it. And I waited. I had 2 full-time academic appointments. So I was running a graduate program at one school, and on the faculty of another, and full-time with both. And what I found, I worked hard for a while. I had to trust that I could support myself practically before walking away from, I was in my 50s. So, I wasn't a kid. I was walking away from, retirement and insurance and the steady paychecks. I'm so glad I did. And I'm glad I did it when I did. I don't know that I would still be employed given what's happened in the world since. Yeah. But I was also very ready to go forward. But I had to walk through that fear and begin to trust that I could be supported. And in fact, I have been. But when I look back at my life, and I look back to my mid-20s when I was, in early recovery and flat broke and terrified of everyone and everything, I was being cared for then too. Something has had my back. And probably yours and everybody else's as well, even when it doesn't look that way. So I'm getting to trust that more now because I've been given some nice evidence to support my ability to trust in it. It took some time.
That's like my biggest problem, man. It's like that trust factor, right? Like just thinking, jumping off the deep end, and then just allowing yourself to feel that fear and to just let the universe guide you along that way. Like, I just feel like things happen for you when it needs to. And it's always working for you, whether, and even if like, you got to feel the bad stuff too. It helps you grow. You can't just be good, 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 good all the time. Like, you have to go through the shit to get through to the flowers.
But you don't always have to dive in. Sometimes you wade into the water. Wading in gets used to the temperature. I waded in. I was doing workshops. I had private client base when I did walk away. I could have done it before, but I think I would have frozen myself into paralysis. I was too worried all the time. And even the guides say this about the books. There's all these books out now, and people discover one and they want to become an expert in them in 6 weeks. They read, 9 books in 6 weeks, and they're frying themselves. And I say, you don't have to do it that way. Let yourself integrate what you learn. Let your experience be your teacher. The guides are there working with us anyway. I understand it if we're working with their material. And I think that is where the trust comes in. And I think we're all in these weird times having this extraordinary opportunity to trust in something, because we're in the unknown. We don't have as much to hold on to as we used to. And the guides talked about this. They dictated the last book, a year before COVID, I think, is when the dictations were happening. So it's on the back cover of the book. There's that little flap bit of text where they talk about this, the unknown. And I think it's very helpful and very true.
Yeah. I mean, you said the masquerade is over, and indeed is over. I think more people are awakening to that, though. I think a lot more people are becoming more awakened to their consciousness, to this different type of spirituality. Like, I find myself more spiritual, and I think people are awakening, like they said in this book. It's like the band. What is it? It's something about a sinking ship and the band stopped playing or something like that, and basically describing it as society is getting the idea that this has all been a facade and that it's over. People are starting to be more aware. Do you find yourself, even though you channel and you've written all these books and you have a really good grasp of the content, like, how often do you fall asleep to the ego and really allow that ego? I don't want to say this, I don't want to act like it's bad. The ego isn't like, oh no, it's like we have the ego. We're never getting rid of it. You can't kill the ego. But I think you should love it too, right? How often do you allow, like, you're going through your day and it's like you feel yourself just falling asleep to it?
A lot. It's still where I'm used to operating from. That's the comfortable. My misery and my fear, my worry, all of that is how I've lived all these years on this planet and before. And the difference now is, I think I understand that everything that happens is an opportunity for me to learn. And so I don't operate in a state of victimization, which was an old way for me to see what's happening now, see how awful this is, confirming my worst case scenarios. But I feel that I maintain the higher without effort more. I'm much more aware when I'm being an asshole. I'm much more aware when I'm being selfish or inauthentic or all those things. And they're not, the good news is none of those places feel comfortable to me anymore at all. The guides say there's not a lie told there's never been a lie told that wasn't told in fear. And, even when I want to say, oh, hey, Trey, I'm sorry I'm late for the interview. My internet was out. That wasn't it. I can't do it anymore. I don't want to live with it. I don't want to live with the problems. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just like I said, I couldn't figure out your damn address and I pasted it. I'm going, what do I do? I'll live with it. So, yeah, I'm human as can be. And I don't try to pretend that I'm beyond anybody. Because the moment I do that, I'm setting myself up. I have this odd ability that I show up with regularly that seems to help people. And that's what I look like. You know, that's how I show up. That's what my life is. You know, if I was 6'8", I probably would have been a basketball player. You know, that would have been how I showed up in the world. I can channel, so I show up this way.
Yeah. This is awesome. How can people connect with you? How can they reach out and find out more about your books?
My website is the best way. It's just paulselig.com, SELIG.com. And you can find the books, you know, there, or you can go to any of the online bookstores, Barnes & Noble or Amazon or IndieBound, any of them. And there's a lot of information on workshops and live streams. I channel almost every Wednesday. I'm doing that today after we finish. And then I do these, you know, 5-day things once a month, which have gotten quite popular. And you can find that all there. You can also, I'm also on Instagram and, you know, all that stuff. You can look for me there.
Awesome. What do you want? Like, I've thought about this and what your answer might be. What do you want your legacy to be when it's all done?
I want maybe that I was kind, that I tried, that I showed up anyway, even when it stank. That's it. I don't really have a stake in legacy. I think it's been challenging enough at times just to get through this life, let alone worried about how others think about it after I'm gone. So if they just say I showed up well, you know, and that maybe I'm not as selfish as I tend to think, you know, that would be nice, you know, but that's it. It's a good question. Nobody's ever asked me that before. But that's it.
That's beautiful, man. I think that's great. I think you do show up. I think you do that every time I see you, every time that, you know, I watch you on a live stream or on Instagram or Facebook or anything like that. I mean, you show up and you know, and you put others before yourself. And that is the ultimate, like, you know, gift that you can give somebody, right? Is showing up for them regardless. Right. And try to help them and give them a gift and raise their vibrations. I think that's, I mean, that's the greatest gift of all. I mean, you definitely help. My wife is a huge fan now. Her favorite saying is, what you damns you back. She says that shit to me all the time. She's like, go ahead and damn me. I'll damn you back.
Well, my favorites too, actually, what they teach.
Paul Selig, this has been amazing, my friend. I can't wait for the next book. And I cannot thank you enough for everything that you do, for everything that you've done. And I look forward to your future contributions.
Thank you so much, Trey. I really appreciate it. It's nice spending time with you.